You're on.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the work session of Las Cruces City Council. Today is Monday, April 27th, 2020. It's approximately 1 p.m. Before we begin, if you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now we have Jennifer from our communications office who's going to introduce our pet of the week.
Good afternoon, Mayor. I'm going to share my screen here if I may. Are you able to see the screen? Not yet.
Not yet. There you go.
Okay. I would like to introduce to you Gouda. Gouda is a 3-year-old male who is charismatic, energetic, and loving. Gouda loves attention, affection, and tummy rubs. He is a perfect companion for morning jogs, a movie night in, or he is perfect for any starter home. And you can meet Gouda at the Animal Service Center of the Mesilla Valley, which is located at 3551 Baton Memorial West. Let's see, somehow my screen is not moving. There we go. Hours of operation are Monday through Friday, noon to 6 p.m., Saturday and Sunday, noon to 5 p.m. You will need to call in advance to make an appointment. That number to call is 382-0018. And of course, there are some limitations at the Animal Service Center, which include free adoptions. The Animal Service Center is not accepting anything but those reservations that you make. So if you do want to check online, you can go to ASCMV.org and click the adoptions link. Animal control is only bringing emergency cases into the shelter. That's sick or injured animals. Also only accepting sick or injured owner surrendered animals. They're taking emergency health appointments only from adopted or fostered animals, and that is because they have reduced staff right now. Dogs in Las Cruces can only be tethered to a stationary object for no more than 2 hours in a 12-hour period, and can only be tethered to a running line, pulley, or trolley system for no more than 4 hours in a 12-hour period, and non-compliance could result in $500 in fines and up to 90 days in jail. And if you feel outside right now, it's about 84 degrees, so that's one of the reasons you don't want them to be outside for that long. COVID-19 basics, there are some things that the communications office would like to share, and that's just some knowledge on COVID-19. What we do know is that there is no vaccine. You can prevent illness by preventing exposure. COVID-19 is spread through respiratory droplets. What you can do, you can wash your hands often, use a sanitizer that is 60% alcohol at least, avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth, avoid close contact, stay at home if you are sick, wear a face covering if you go out in public, and keep at least 6 feet apart from others. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Excuse me. We have 2 items on the agenda. The first one is going to be the inspection process review. And I saw Larry Nichols, so I'm going to presume he is presenting. Larry?
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. Larry Nichols, Community Development Director. We'll be bringing you information today on the inspection process that is part of our strategic business plan, the Building Safety Program. And I'll be sharing the screen now. First, I would like to mention to everyone that our inspection process is a part of our strategic business plan. And as a result of the strategic business plan, we improvised our inspection requirements. We set up a results that we wanted to achieve when we first put this into our use. What we said was that 90% of our reviews will be completed on or before the established due date. The Community Development Department has been meeting that goal through the second quarter of fiscal year 2020 for both residential and commercial plan review. And we are at a 93% achievement to that goal. The second part of the strategic business plan results was 90% of our inspections will be conducted within 24 hours. The Community Development Department did not meet that goal through the second quarter of fiscal year 2020 in the electrical inspection sector, particularly the solar photovoltaic inspection. We were at a 47% on that. There were several reasons behind that. We had a staffing vacancy in our electrical inspection section, and we found that the photovoltaic contractors were turning in about 15 to 20 inspections per day there through the months of starting about September, October. And so that put us at that percentage. We have made corrections for that, and I and Dr. Piss will be presenting that here through the presentation of how we addressed that and brought it back into our standard. All the other inspection sectors did meet our goal for the inspection 24 hours or less, and we were at 92% on those sectors of the inspection program. Measures taken to achieve the inspector goal were filling vacancies. We worked overtime through the months of December, particularly, and into January of this last year. We worked on weekends, we worked holidays, and we improved our inspection technology. The one-stop shop line of business and the building safety program and the Community Development Department has a division structure. It has 6 disciplines and certifications for our staff. They are certification building inspector for general building. We have electrical inspectors, we have plumbing inspectors, we have mechanical inspectors, zoning staff, and we have engineering staff that perform our inspections. Just a quick update on the inspection activity 2019, and that would be from January through December of that year. We issued 7,125 permits through the department. That was basically a 9% increase overall in construction activity, which, by the way, I need to mention that was an increase from the previous year increase from the year before that. So we have been on a very much of a upward trend, and then 16% increase in permits for residential through that same time period. I'd like to point out that during that time, we talk about the inspection activity, the general building inspections and the trade inspections being mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. We had 26,425 inspections for that time period. And of those, solar photovoltaics, as I mentioned a moment ago, had seen a dramatic increase, but we had 1,234 photovoltaic inspections during that time, based on an issuance of 617 permits. Zoning, we inspect those as part of our inspection process as well. We had over 100 building permit inspections related to zoning. Our engineering staff, they're the ones that inspect our drainage structures, our rock walls, our right-of-way inspections, and they had over 950 inspections. Business registrations, business licenses are issued, and we inspect those facilities to see that they are, in fact, located where they state they are, and that fact they are in business according to their permit business license registration. And we did 2,834 new and renewal inspections on those. The building Safety Division are not the only folks that perform inspections in the city. The fire department does inspections. They do their annual inspections of commercial businesses. Public Works does inspections on utility work and utility lines. Utility department also does inspections with the same. And then we get a lot of support from the police department for the code compliance staff to go out and look at our complaints that folks may have in relationship to an inspection that might be needed. At this point, I'm going to yield the floor to Dr. Tim.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, thank you for having me. Tim Pitts, I'm the Deputy Director for Building and Development for the city. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how our building inspection process works, and it all begins with an application. Someone is wishing to build something, they submit plans and an application for a permit to our front desk staff that are here in the front of City Hall on the first floor. Those building plans are reviewed and approved by people in our department and also eight other agencies around the city. And we coordinate all those reviews to get those building plans approved. And at that point, if the building plans are approvable, then we issue the permit to a licensed contractor. We can only issue permits in the state of New Mexico. The only people eligible to receive permits, to have a permit issued to them, is somebody who is licensed by the state to do work in the area in which the project is, the construction is going to take place. And so we have all of those steps that happen before we do our first inspection, before really the job even begins. We have a lot of steps to go there. Now, not every permit requires an plan review, and not every permit needs to go through every one of these steps. Every one of them does have to be issued to a licensed contractor, but not everyone has a plan review. But I want to make the point that the building inspection utilizes the building plans, the approved building plans. And you can look to the cartoon to the right to understand why it's important that we follow the plans. That, I think, more than anything, for most of our problems, it comes down to that issue that the building plans either take, we have a very hard time getting them approved because of for some reason or another, or that somebody does something in the field that does not follow their plan. So once the plans have been approved and they've been and the permit has been issued, we as the city staff, as the building safety program, wait for the permit holder to schedule an inspection, and they have several inspections they have to schedule. They know what they are because on their permit card it'll tell them which permits, which inspections they're going to need, and it's their responsibility to contact us. Most people contact us via the online system, although we have an email system. You can call us by phone. You can come in, and although not at the moment, you can't come in, but some contractors just prefer to come in and talk to people. They don't like the computer. But we take care of everybody the best we can. But it's up to the permit holder to schedule the inspection. Staff goes out, inspects the project, results the inspection, and records that electronically in our Excel system. And that Excel system has a citizen access portal that allows anybody in the city to be able to investigate what permits have been issued and where they are in the process. Correction notices, it used to be that we posted them in the building. So we still do that, except in one case that we'll talk about in a little bit. But now we also post them online. So as a member of the public, you can see what corrections were asked for in there, because it'll be a correction notice associated with the online permit. And then we do final inspections to assure compliance. And it's the final inspection that kind of finishes everything off. We usually will do plumbing, mechanical first, and then we'll do electrical, and then we will finish off with the building final. The building inspector is responsible for making sure that all the other permits, all the other inspections were done and done properly and passed. And then when that's done, we tell our permit techs, okay, we have finished our inspections. Now it's time to issue a certificate of occupancy, and that gives the property owner or the project manager the ability to occupy that space for the intended use. So in our system, we have building, as Larry said, we have building inspectors, we have electrical inspectors, mechanical inspectors, and we have plumbing inspectors. In the state of New Mexico, these are state certified inspectors, and we have them in 3 categories. So we have building inspectors, and they do both commercial and residential inspections. They are responsible to be aware of the building code and the residential code in both commercial and in residential. The same is true for electrical. It's both commercial and residential. Many other places have a separate residential inspector and a separate commercial inspector. New Mexico has decided that's not the way they wish to do it, and so we follow their certification. Mechanical and plumbing generally are the same inspectors. They are expected to have certification in both commercial and residential in both mechanical and plumbing. Our inspectors, especially our 8 building inspectors, are all International Code Council certified in multiple certifications, and they are all certified by the New Mexico State, the Construction Industry Division of the state of New Mexico. We have in our department education and experience from the bachelor's, master's, PhD level. Everybody has at least 3 years, and in many cases, we brought people in at 10 years in the trade. So these are people that are extremely well versed in the industry. They've been doing this for a very long time. We are the 2nd largest jurisdiction in the state, and we're one of the few, I think 5 that have all the certifications, and we have multiple inspectors in each certification, which is most of the other jurisdictions have 1, possibly 2 in each of the. We are well respected by the state. They look to our inspectors for advice. They ask them to be on boards to talk about how the state building division is going to move forward. The construction industry division will move forward. We have 44 certifications between the group of us. Most of them are the standard building, commercial building, residential building, commercial plumbing, and so on. But we have some unique ones. So, for instance, one of our guys has a medical gas certification. He's the only one in southern New Mexico that has that certification. So we can do our own medical gas inspections here in Las Cruces. Everyone else has to call out for a special inspector for that. Between us, we have 162 years of experience. And to give you some numbers of what we currently have in our people who can do inspections of the various types, we have 1 building official who is currently Larry. We have 1 combination inspector who can do both building and electrical. We have 2 building inspectors. We have two standalone electrical inspectors. We have 3 mechanical and plumbing inspectors. We have 2 engineering inspectors and 1 zoning inspector. We have a few more that can do some of those last 2 categories. I didn't put myself on this list. I could do those. I have done some building inspector inspections, but that's the group that was doing those. But these 12 people are the group that were doing the what do you say, Larry? 26,000 inspections in 2019. And lest you think this COVID-19 has put us back. We are actually up in number of permits issued in March and April of this year. We had a record number of new single-family homes in March. We had a normal number in April. So it's not stopping people from buying houses. It's not stopping people from building houses. And I'll let Larry talk a little more about that a little later on. Larry talked about the 47% of meeting our goal on inspections. The biggest part of that problem was we had an electrical inspector vacancy. We lost one of our electrical inspectors. He left and he's working in the county. In the state of New Mexico, there were only 42 certified electrical inspectors. So it's very difficult to find a certified electrical inspector and bring him in and have him have experience and ready to go. And it took us a long time to find somebody we were comfortable with. It hurt us terribly that at the same time the petroleum industry was doing very well and everybody could get jobs in Hobbs and Midland, and they didn't need to come to Las Cruces. That may be changing today. We may see a little bit different result today, but that was at the time we were searching for that inspector. It was a very serious problem for us to try and fill that position. We also have had, Larry talked about the rise in the number of permits. And as I said, again, in 2020, we're seeing another rise in permits. We're having more and more permits issued, more and more inspections being performed. And we have just about, if everything goes great, we can keep up with the demand based on the staffing we have. But even with planned vacations and doctor visits and so on, it sometimes can give us some, it can really throw us off. That meeting the next day inspection is very difficult when I've got 3 people out because it's Easter or something like that. We can usually catch back up by the next week, but every once in a while you get that unplanned thing. You get the person that has to go in for surgery and they're out for 10 weeks. And those are very difficult. We don't have enough capacity to deal with that, the loss of somebody like that. So we have, and with discussion with the city management, we have asked for a building official, a separate building official, so that Larry can be our director and not have to also be our building official. We've asked for another combination inspector in the upcoming budget that you'll be seeing in a few weeks. We also have asked for a couple other things that should help that, but in terms of the inspections, those are the 2. Okay. So coming back to the inspection and what happens in the process, on site we typically do 12 inspections. So we have 3 primary disciplines. We have the building, the electrical, and the plumbing mechanical, and we usually do them together like that. And then each of them have Larry's used the words for the building inspections. So the foundation, the frame, the finishes, and the final. In electrical or plumbing, we might call it the rough in, the top out, and so on to the final. But they all have multiple inspections. You want to look at the plumbing before the concrete's poured. You want to look at the electrical before the drywall's put on the wall. You want to look at, you want to make sure that the things that are behind the walls are done properly. So each of the inspectors do on a residential job, and we're currently doing last year we did about 600 new homes last year. So you can do that math on that. The commercial projects are generally more complex. Not always. If it's just an interior completion, they're not. But most, like the hospital, the 3 Crosses Regional Medical Center, for instance, we do we're usually out there for at least a full day, maybe 2 days when we're doing inspections. And so, given all the issues that we have had in terms of we're not meeting our goals, we have things we really would like to be able to do. And Larry and I, back in December, started to notice we were having a very serious problem with especially our electrical inspections. We could not get them done in time. It wasn't acceptable to Larry or me. We are not in the business of holding people up. We're in the business of making sure their projects get done. I have a great love for the construction industry. I like to see guys working. I like to see guys getting paid because that's their thing. That's their livelihood. They don't work, they don't get paid. So when we hold them up, it doesn't make me feel good. And Larry was a builder for a long time. He knows what that feels like when you can't pay your guys because you're not getting paid yourself. So we had to come up with some solutions, and it wasn't just to get the position hired, though we did continue working on that. But we started looking around, asking around the country, what are people doing? And we came up with a few things. And so we have a few innovations that we came up with back in November, December time. One of them is that we have convinced most of our inspectors to learn another trade and to get another certification. And we have said, if you can get another certification so that, when you're out there doing the plumbing final inspection, you can also do the electrical final inspection, save an inspector from going out. Let's do that. There was a long time when the goal was to have inspectors be specialists in their area. Well, it's our belief that we will get a lot more resiliency if we have inspectors that can do multiple tasks. And so that's what we've been working on. The second one, Larry and I, after talking to a couple of people when we were in the International Code Council convention, we got onto this idea of interactive video inspection. And so this is an inspection in which the inspector sits here in the office. We have special equipment for him. He contacts the contractor or subcontractor, and they show him on video the project. Some projects it's hard to do that on a frame job, for instance. If you're trying to look at how tight a bolt is on it's not always easy to figure out how tight it is. All you need to know is these studs are X number of inches apart, or that yes, you have your wires screwed in the right locations, and they're not bending, or they're more than 6 feet away from the edge, and you can have the contractor put down a measuring tape or something. It works really, really well. And here's a typical inspection, and especially if we're in town, a typical inspection is somebody calls in the inspection on, let's say, Sunday afternoon, and we get it Monday morning. We come in, we have this inspection on the books. We'd like to get it done today. My inspector takes it, and let's say it's down on Hadley, West Hadley somewhere. The inspector says, well, I've got to get down to Bravia Dove. I've got to get up to North Main Street, and I've got to get, so he spends 20 minutes driving down out to West Hadley, goes and does a 7-minute inspection, gets back in his truck, drives 20 minutes down to Bravia Dove, does a 15-minute inspection, drives up to Legends West, does a frame perhaps, that's a 45-minute inspection, and he has spent more time in his truck than he was spending actually doing the inspection. So what the IVI did is to remove that travel time out of the equation. And we found that we could do 2 or 3 times the number of inspections by video. And as I say, it's not always perfect, and it doesn't work in every case. But in the current situation, we're very much learning that we can use it a lot more than we thought we could, especially when a guy is stuck at home and his choice is to take leave or or do some inspections, he figures out how to do inspections on the video. And it's gotten great results and great response from the contractors. Some of them were very reluctant at the beginning. They said, I don't know how that works. I can't figure out how to make that work. But they now say, we are, I don't know, Larry, maybe the only one in the state that's kept up our inspections we're probably better off than we were in February in terms of how our inspections are going. So, and then we do have some special inspections. We do have to call in engineers, especially on things like steel and things like that we don't have special expertise here. Architects, sometimes we get test labs, especially in concrete work, we have test labs too. Okay, and then why is this inspection process so important? We don't view the inspection process as us against them. The inspection process is not us against the developer or the contractor or the owner. The inspection process is us certifying that the developer or the contractor or the owner has a project that has a building that meets code. Code is the International Building Code is a commonly used code across 47 states, the United States, multiple foreign countries. Virtually every city that I've ever been to uses the IBC or some very close modification of it. And so it's us saying to the industry, we're going to stand up and make sure that you build to code. Why does the industry want us to do that? Well, because the industry needs a third party to have gone in there and looked at what happened so that they can say, hey, to the mortgage company, no, this was built to code. And the mortgage company can say, okay, when we give you our $300,000 or $200,000, we can have assurance that this was built to the standards that it needs to have been built to. And we're very proud of that. We're very proud of the way that we provide the lending institutions, the insurance companies, the title companies, everybody that's relying on us to have a project that isn't going to fall down at the first wind, right? Isn't going to fall down. We have snowfall. Isn't going to have problems. Isn't going to have a fire break out in the walls because the electrical wiring wasn't put in properly. Everybody that requires that's who we are certifying to. And so when we give a certificate of occupancy to somebody, we are saying, this is a house that I would feel comfortable living in. And so the new buyer can feel comfortable knowing that they could live in it. And we've had situations where a builder was maybe a little upset with us for not getting the C of O out as soon as we could. But we've also heard in those cases from the prospective owner saying, well, thank you for doing that because I wouldn't have wanted it that way. So, and usually we do our best to work that out with them, make sure that this project gets done properly, and we can issue a proper certificate of occupancy that means for a safe building. And so I'll hand it back to Larry for some finishing comments.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Pitts. Larry, and before you jump in, Larry, I hear that you actually did a inspection through the video and made a contractor pretty happy. So that's pretty good. Appreciate you doing that, going the extra mile. Uh-oh, I think you're muted, Larry. There you go.
There, are we on mic now?
Yes, sir.
There we go. Before we get into the discussion, I would have a few other comments ending the presentation, and those would be related to the COVID pandemic that we are all experiencing at this time, and of course the building contractors and the developers are part of that scenario. But we had no way of knowing when we had. No, I'm talking. Are you hearing me? Are you not, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. My assistant came in and said she thought I was muted, but we're good. Sorry for that. We had no way of knowing in January and February, when we were bringing on this interactive video inspection, that we would be faced with what we're facing here in March and April. But thankfully, we had that innovative idea and we put it into play. And we are hearing from our contractors, our developers, saying that this is working for us. This is enabling us to continue our operations. I have been to the field a number of times doing a few inspections on site. The contractors are working with the public health guidelines. Fortunately, the construction activity on site, they can maintain distancing. They can keep their groups of staff no more than 5. They have placed sanitizing hand washing stations along other sites as well. So many of those things have been put in place to help the process continue. I did a real quick check before this meeting today. We are close to 40, using the residential section as a barometer or a benchmark. We're about 43 to 44 potential inspections and permits for the month of April. As we close out the month, that's going to be above what we were a year ago. As Tim mentioned earlier, last month we were at 72 new residential applications. The activity, fortunately, they are able to continue. I said our continuing operation plan and our standing operating procedure for the interactive video to the State Construction Industries Division for them to support our continuing of operations. And fortunately, we've been able to do that, and things are continuing to progress. As we come out of the pandemic restrictions on activity, I think we're going to find that the construction industry aspect is going to be in a very good position to not have to push the restart button. It's going to be a continuation. So with those remarks about how we have continued with and implemented the inspection process with the COVID pandemic, I will stand for questions that you may have regarding the inspection process.
Thanks, Larry. We have Councilor Vasquez who has a comment or question, and then Councilor Beta-Stubbe.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Tim, for that presentation. Could you explain again briefly just you mentioned the 47% permit rate for the solar photovoltaic installations, I think 617 to date. Are those remaining inspections that you have, or were those inspections not approved? Could you just go over that a little bit more again?
Yes, Mayor and Councilor Vasquez, I'll start with that, and if Tim may want to add a little as we go along. But Councilor Vasquez, what we found was that there was a real interest, and this was driven by tax incentives on the solar photovoltaic systems for folks. And there was a deadline of December 31st to achieve some of those tax benefits. And so we began to get a lot of projects come in, like 15 or 20 a day. That the 18 solar voltaic contractors and the city were putting these systems in. We could not keep pace with that. And so it impacted our percentage of completion for electrical inspections within our 3 to 5 days. The figure, the 40%, was that we backlogged at that period of time. We were backlogged nearly 300 inspections, trying to catch up. As an inspection request would come in, we would put it on a roster, and then we would begin to address those on a basis of the first, as they have them called in, we would take that inspection and schedule it. But it was very concerning to myself, especially, and to Tim as well, In the 22 years that I've been in the building department business, I have never had a situation of that nature. So we recognize that that was unacceptable to our customers and to us. And that's when we begin to find innovative ways to address that. Today, we are current with all of our electrical inspections, all of our building inspections, all of our solar photovoltaic inspections. One of the means of doing that enabled us to achieve that status was that we began to schedule Fridays only for solar photovoltaic inspections. All three of our electrical inspectors were assigned projects. We were doing 40 to 45 a day, and we're doing that now. And we are caught up in all of our inspection requests.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate that, Larry. Yeah, I think it's definitely been a good economic driver of the solar industry, and I know there's been both state tax credits and federal tax credits that have kind of bounced around for the last few years. Some reauthorized, some not, some different changes that have prompted homeowners to put solar on the rooftop. I think ultimately it generates GRT for the city, creates jobs in the solar industry, and also helps us meet our climate change mitigation goals. And so I think making sure in the future that we have, as you mentioned today, the capacity to take on that activity, that economic activity from an industry that really benefits a whole bunch of different parts of our community is really important. And so thank you, Larry and Tim, for prioritizing that. I think we want to make it as easy and painless for homeowners to go solar, and anticipate that industry is just going to keep growing. I also have a question for you about the general building and trades inspections. You mentioned in a previous slide, or you have on a previous slide there, you did 26,475 building and trades inspections. Of those inspections, how many of those were successful, or how many times did you have to go back to correct or mitigate certain issues related to those inspections? If you could characterize it, you might not have the exact number, I realize that.
And Councilor Vasquez, I could get that number for you. I don't have it on the top of my head at this particular moment, but you have identified something that has caused a difficulty with the inspection delays, and that is an inspection is requested by the applicant. We schedule it, we go perform the inspection, and find that it fails, which requires a re-inspection. Re-inspections are very time costly for the contractor, the developer, and the building department. So what we're trying to find a means and method of reducing re-inspections, because that would move everyone along. One of the things that we're asking of the contractors is for them to do a pre-quality control, if you will, a QC review of their work before they call for the inspection, and perhaps catch a few items, small items that would create a re-inspection. So we've been working with the contractors on that. Councilor Abeta Stubbe attended our Government Affairs, Home Builders Government Affairs Committee meeting the other day, when we talked about that particular issue of finding a way to reduce the number of re-inspection. If we reduce the number of re-inspections, it will be helpful to everyone.
Councilor, if I may.
Yes.
Just to add to what Larry's saying, one of the problems we had with a lot of our, especially the solar photovoltaic, is that the industry is such that the people doing the installations are not necessarily electricians, and they should be getting certified and doing electrician work. And the big ones are, and they're working on it, and they're trying to get there. It's certainly something we need to work with the industry on to assure that we're getting good quality. But what we were finding, especially in 2019, is that we could easily go out and fail 60 to 70% of the solar photovoltaic systems. And there's some reasons for that. That's not really of their own making. It has to do with how some of the services are undersized. They're not ready for the type of electrical system that's getting put in. They have to get rebuilt. They're not really electricians. So there's some institutional things and some structural things that I think maybe we need to be a little more proactive and work on to make it a little easier for them. But that was a very serious problem. I mean, it's very disheartening to send out an inspector, have him go out and do 20 inspections and come back and say, I passed 4 of them.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there going, well, what's the point of going out? Why did we just waste our day? And it's gotten better. We've been better in the way that I think some of the things where it was kind of they would feed into themselves. So we would go out, we would have an inspection scheduled. We'd go out, and the electrician, for instance, might say, well, he's not coming out for another week. And then they wouldn't be ready. They'd call in early, and we'd show up and be like, well, why isn't this done? They said, well, we didn't think you'd be here till next week. And so there were a lot of those sorts of things that were kind of playing into it. And I think by getting back to a more standardized, here's what to expect. We do our solar Mondays, solar systems on Mondays. We do regular inspections on the remaining days. We do emergency inspections on Fridays. It's always full of electrical, same day change outs and things like that. It's a very rush around and do whatever's sitting there day. Because you want to get it in. You don't want people sitting around with no electricity till Monday. So that's. I think I just want to toss in a little bit more of how it kind of fed on itself during that time period, and maybe why you probably heard a lot more complaints during that time, and I think that we are past that.
Sure. Well, thank you. And I support any measures as well as any budget adjustments to your respective operations that support more of that public education, especially around a growing industry, right, that's creating good jobs, clean jobs, realizing that solar companies, big and small, probably aren't going to be able to hire the electricians, the qualified licensed electricians that they need. And dealing with that reality, right, that they're still going to be selling rooftop systems, customers are still going to be buying them, and that us as a partner at the city should be doing our best to educate, from the best perspective that we can, those companies and those contractors on how to be successful in that process. I think that's a win-win for industry, for jobs, for the city. Like you said, rather than failing 80% of inspections, as perhaps was the case at one particular point in time. So I think that I support that. And I think identifying that is a good thing for management and for council to make sure that you guys have the resources you need to do that. And that goes, some conversations I've had in particular, that with some subcontractors that say, hey, if you're going to do like a building remodel, or you're going to do you're going to license your kitchen, or you're going to do X and Y, you have to know which contractors to work with locally, because there are some who know how to get it properly inspected and some that don't. And so what I'm hearing is that there's contractors out there who may take on a project that ultimately has to be inspected by the city for like, commercial kitchen or for some rewiring, that end up delaying that project, right, by weeks or months because they didn't know exactly what the inspectors wanted. And so what I hear is that, which is unfortunate because we don't want business to, I think, be unfairly done in a way where, people are saying, work with this company because they know what the city wants. Don't work with that company because they have no experience, right? We want people to be on a level playing field, I think, when it comes to being able to take on those redevelopment opportunities And to me, that's a particular concern because in my district, I want to promote infill, right? I want to promote getting as many buildings and commercial places redeveloped, right, into new businesses, new facilities. That means adding, that means remodeling, that means upgrading electrical systems that were probably built in the 70s or 80s to get them up to code. And so being able to get those businesses up and running when they can do with folks that that ultimately speeds up that process, or at least that helps business people be able to create those jobs in our community is great. I do have a question about the virtual inspections that you mentioned, which I think is a great opportunity to build maybe on that past COVID. Are there plans, Larry or Tim, to continue with virtual inspections for certain things past COVID, as you've realized that you can make some efficiencies in that process?
Yes, Mayor and Councilor Vasquez, we had this interactive virtual inspection prior to the COVID pandemic.
Okay.
We have every intention to continue it because we have found it increases efficiency on both sides, on the contracting and the construction industry side, and for our inspector side. So we'll be building on that. And Tim will be also, might mention, we're continuing with innovation ideas for our department. One of them is a software that would enhance the plan submittal. Tim, do you want to give a little more information on that?
Sure, Larry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Vasquez. And just to add to, just before I talk about that plan review, just to add to, we actually find the interactive video, there's one area in which is a huge savings for the city, and actually it will very much have one of our biggest problems is if someone gets injured on the job and they're out, they can't do any inspections during that time. And where they're likely to get injured. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems to me that the roofs in this city are getting taller and taller and taller. And our guys are getting older and older. And I don't know about you, but it's a scary thought to go up on a 20-foot ladder. I get up there and I'm like, well, I'm not sure my balance is quite where it was when I was 19. So I do not want our inspectors going up on roofs if we can avoid it. And what the video inspection allows is the contractor to show the roof from right there when he's already up there. He's got the proper equipment, he's got the proper ladders, he's got someone to help him out. So that's something, for instance, that I think we have learned on that one. We've learned that is the absolute way to go. And in fact, if the ICC ever lets us have a conference again, I would like to present that as a reason to do video inspection to the International Code Council. But getting back to Larry's comment, one of the things that, as he said, we are continuing to try to innovate. I'm a big believer in making sure we could do with what we've got and not keep trying to ask for resources. I want to make our resources more effective in what they're doing. One of the things that we're finding is that there is some dead time in plan review. And I think that we can find ways to innovate that through software, where we can reduce the time it takes to get it from our reviewers into the hands of the applicant and vice versa. Right now, it takes us anywhere between 1 and 3 days to get from a reviewer back to an applicant. And there's some technical reasons, I can explain them to you, but it really doesn't matter what the reason is. It just, there is some time, some dead weight time lost in there. And it's probably the time that my staff likes the least because it's a waste of their time. And so if we can get that cut down, we could very much improve the response time. We could put some of the onus back on the applicant instead of having them be allowed to wait for us, and then give it back to them and give them the time it takes for them to revise their plans, get them back to us, instead of us sitting around waiting for 2 or 3 days to get it back. So we're going to be probably bringing to you, I'm not sure in terms of the total price, whether that's going to come to you or it's something we can do operationally, but we are talking about some other innovations that we're looking to do.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Tim. I think that's a smart investment, right? We're essentially investing in something that invests back into the city, right? The more construction that we have, both residential and commercial, the more GRT we get in return. So I would definitely encourage you guys to think about what those efficiencies are, what those budget needs are, to bring to council that helps everybody, right? Helps homeowners, helps business people, it helps the city. I think that's a smart investment on our part. I just have one last question, and it's more of a big picture question, but from where you were and the significant progress that you've made thus far to today, where do you want to see the inspection process in a year? If there was a couple of things that you could say you wanted to fix in a year, what would those things be, and how can we help get you guys there?
Councilor Vasquez, a year from now, I'd like to be able to report to the mayor, council, city council that we have reduced our re-inspection situation by 50% or more. I think that would be one. The other thing would be able to report back to you that we have met are compliant with our strategic business plan goals for plan review and inspection. We're there, but we want to continue to be there and not find ourselves getting in a unusual circumstance that we fall below those percentages of our goal.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Abeta Stubbe.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Larry and Dr. Pitts. I also want to thank you for allowing me to be present over Zoom for the Builders Association meeting. That was actually very insightful, and I was able to hear how helpful the virtual inspections have been and how pleased people have been on the other side for that. One of the questions that kind of seemed to be touched upon and I wanted to follow up with was, it seems to me that every once in a while there's some communication issues between subcontractors, their client, and with the city to make sure things flow very smooth together. Do we often engage with the applicant, the inspecting applicant, letting them know that there are these holdups, but they're not necessarily with our side, but they're with the subcontractor side? Could you explain that process a little bit for me, please?
Yes, Mayor and Councilor Abete Stubbe, well, thank you. I want to thank you also for your interest in attending our Government Affairs Committee meeting with the home builders. Those meetings are very productive for both of us. To answer your question, the construction industry division, in particular, subcontractors face the same dilemma that we faced, in that we've had this increase of activity or workload, if you will, but they have been unable to find staff. They can hire individuals, but they find that they have to be journeyman electrician, or to use electricians as an example, or they have to be journeyman plumbers, and they're having difficulty finding those folks to staff their work. And so I think that's where a lot of the difficulty comes to the contractor to subcontractor relationship. I can remember back in my previous life when I was a builder that that was one of the most difficult things to overcome, was to get your subcontractors to the job with qualified staff to perform the work. So we all share in this dilemma of having a skilled workforce.
Larry, do you want to also point out about the Acela system, how that's helped reduce, having the plans put in so that the contractors can see it, the subs can see it, I guess, of course, the city and the owner of the project, so that one side can't be pointing fingers at the other, and they can see who's approved it, where it's at, and where it sits.
Mr. Mayor, I'll take that one if that's okay. Absolutely, that's our goal. And what we're finding is that not everybody knows how to use Excella as well as they need to. And we have tried doing courses over at the Home Builders Association every few months. We try and do something, and I think that we probably just need to continue that. Because what you said, Mr. Mayor, is absolutely right. If the applicant, well, the contractor is the applicant on the general building permit. The subcontractor, the electrician, let's say, is the applicant on the electrical. And what ends up happening is that, one guy saying you got to get this project done, and the other guy saying, well, I got 6 other projects I got to get done. I'm going to get to yours when I get to it. I'll do my best to keep you happy. And there's a lot of interaction that goes on. And in the past, it was always easy to blame the city. Well, I don't know, I'm waiting for the inspector. And now they can look at what the Mr. Mayor said. They can look at the Excella system and they can see, oh, wait, that inspection was never called in. So that's helping a little bit. But one of the things, and just again, going down this road of innovation, Larry and I have asked our GIS department to spend some time on maybe some dashboards, some things that can help people along with their, so it's a little easier to find the information you're looking for. Maybe you can get your whole project together. And that's a little bit of learning on our side of how you've got to set things up in the system and make sure they're easy to find. And then we also need to produce some things so that it's clearer to everybody where a project is. And so that's something that I know our GIS section is working on right now. That as you know, up until December of 2018, we still had half of our projects. All of our business registrations were still in Munis. And so it wasn't until January of 2019 that we moved them into Excella. We had a rough year, and we'll admit it. That was a rough year getting through the business registrations. But you'll notice that people aren't complaining anymore because Excella is a better system. It just works better for people. They're finding it easier to work with. It just, change is difficult for everybody, for people on our side and people in the public. So we got that through. We haven't yet, and now we're having Excella be migrated into a different platform so that we can integrate with its database better. We've had a very hard time integrating with the database in Excella because it was in Oracle, and nobody in my shop, I'm probably the only one that knows any Oracle SQL, and I haven't done Oracle SQL in 10 years. So I am not writing some database analysis on something I haven't done in 10 years. So we're left with, so now we're going into SQL Server. That's what the rest of the city works on. That'll be in SQL Server. So that should help us be able to get this data out.
Fantastic. And then it seems like it's really probably important for not only home builders, but those even opening up, mom and pop shops and having to change things out to kind of know this Excella program. So you may already be doing it with the Economic Development Department, but having some sort of training or introduction on this is where, when you're having this project, when you're changing out your business, look here, that type of education I think might be really helpful for all commercial and the residential businesses to be able to know about that and really use it to its full advantage too. I did have a question about business registrations and how those are looking right now on renewals, especially with our locals, if we're keeping track, especially during this time, on those renewal systems with our local businesses.
I'll address that, Councilor Beta. You're speaking of business registration renewals.
Yes.
We have about 2,800 total business license registrations. They come up for renewal through different times of the year, a few every month. They're usually they amount to between the brick and mortar renewals and the home occupancy renewals. They number about 200 to 250 per month. We have found that we're on track with that. We report that every month on our construction activity report. I believe you received that. We give it to the city manager's office for their review, and then they forward it on to you. But there is a page in there that talks about registration renewals, and we find that they're about 200 to 250 per month. We seem to be on track from where we were a year ago.
Thank you. I think that it'll be important as we move on and as we're dealing with the current situation with COVID to look to see if we're seeing any tracks or trends with certain industries not renewing those types of businesses. I think it'll give us good indicators on how we can best help different industries as well.
Councilor, that's a good point you make. We'll be very vigilant of that on the April report to see if there's been any significant reduction in those renewals. There very well could be, because people have not able to continue business operations.
Thank you. And then I had a question about when we send out a contractor to go do the inspection, do we charge for that each time they have to go out? And if we have a contractor that can do the dual inspection, is it still two separate charges? Is it one charge? I'm just not familiar as much with that process. Oh, Dr. Pitts, I think you're still on mute.
Too late. I waited too long to click it. It already shrunk down on me. The building permit fee includes the inspections in it. So do not charge a fee for inspection unless usually if we show up and when we were asked to show up and you aren't ready for us, we're going to charge a reinspection fee. The city taxpayer shouldn't have to fund you not being ready for us when we come, and the rest of the builders shouldn't have to deal with that. So we charge it then. We will charge it if we're going out and not getting a whole lot. But for the most part, what we're trying to do is avoid charging re-inspections, especially on things that we can do a follow-up inspection by video. If we say, give me a call when you're done and show it to me, that's what we want to do. So the idea is not to charge them extra if we can avoid it, but we also have that penalty in there when it's clear they're wasting taxpayer resources.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. We have a Mayor Pro Tem Gandara.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Larry and Dr. Pitts, for your presentation and your insight, your thoughtful insight. I appreciate the transparency and the willingness to sort of just put it all out there. I think that was one of the benefits of purchasing the CELA, was so that we could get the numbers of the data, right, to support the work. Some of my questions are around, I think it was on page 9 where you listed all the inspectors. You've done over 26,000. So basically that's about what, 2,300 inspections per inspector, maybe even a little more given what each of them are certified to do. Do you feel that with the request, the current request of a combined inspector and the other. Sorry, can you hear me?
A lot of interference now. I don't know what's happening.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
So do you believe that with the additional inspector that it'll reduce, well, obviously it'll reduce for each inspector, but is that enough people to manage what you're receiving?
And Mayor and Pro Tem Underup, you noticed on our presentation that we had requested additional staff, building official being one of them. The other was for the combination inspector. We recognize that if we continue this increased activity, I used a formula when I wrote my thesis for my certified public manager credential from Arizona State University. Go Sun Devils. I used a formula. It was called W sub L plus R sub A equals CS sub L. The W sub L was workload. The R sub A was resources available. And then the equal CS sub L was customer service level. If you change anything in the first part of that formula, the workload plus the resources available, you're going to impact your customer service level. If your workload goes up, such as what we have now, or resources remain the same or lessen for some reason, your customer service level is going to suffer. It's going to be compromised. So by us recognizing that we have if we were enabled to have additional combination inspectors with our existing staff and a new hire, that would enable us to do multiple inspections on the same site at the same site visit. In other words, they could do a foundation inspection and a underground plumbing inspection at the same site visit. And that would help us to address the number of inspections that could be performed daily. And then plus the interactive video inspection is going to enable us to do the 20 to 25, even 30 inspections. One of my building inspectors reported last week in our tailgate meeting that we have every Wednesday morning at 7 o'clock with our inspectors. The previous day, he had done 27 inspections because he was able to do a number of those with the IVI. That's going to enable us to address that. But yes, additional staff is going to be needed at some point because we're on a growth posture right now. Even with the COVID pandemic, we're going to see that once we are reinstated from the restrictions, we're going to see it really take off, I believe.
I appreciate that, Larry. I guess my question is that one inspector, combined inspector, going to be enough? Because the way I see it, the resources have increased, will increase, and we have to be ready for it. And I don't know that one is going to be enough. I guess this is our time, right? That you're in front of us giving an update, but it's an opportunity for us to sort of question and answer, right? Back and forth, asking you, is this enough? And if it isn't, what is going to be that magic number in terms of the staffing? And I guess that's what I'm asking.
So Larry, can I take this one?
Go ahead.
Mayor Pro Tem. I appreciate what you're saying. I agree with it. But what I would say is that, as I was saying to Councilor Vasquez, we are trying to be proactive. We're trying to get as much out of the resources we have. I think we can get more out of the resources we have by making them more efficient. And the whole Excel process was a part of that. This isn't the only thing we're asking for. We're also asking for a we're taking one of our permit techs and we're asking to make him into a commercial review coordinator to take the commercial projects and handle them through the process. So we have other things we're asking for, but I believe that with the efficiencies we can gain out of what we're doing and with these positions, and along with the things like the combination inspectors, the cross training, the ability for one, we've already found this to be the case, that we can send one guy out and he can do 2 or 3 inspections at a time. And it is really helping us out. And part of this is we have taken, since Larry's been here, we've taken a different philosophy on what inspection is about. And again, I said this before, it's not about having the one guy that's expert in this one field. We have been trying to get people cross-trained. This is what we learned when we looked at some of the Colorado cities that have dealt with this, some of the places like Vegas, that those suburbs in Vegas that are doing 50 inspections a day. And you're going, how are you pulling that off? And I would ask them, how are you doing this? And I took whatever advice I could, and we're taking it. Trust me, I'm not shy about asking for money, but I'm also don't believe that I should ask for money when I think that we can cover it. We can do the job.
No, I appreciate that. I just remember we hear those complaints, right, from all those people, the contractors, the developers, and sometimes they're fair, sometimes they're not. But it's been a long time, at least in the 4 years that I've seen you all come back and ask for additional inspectors. And so here's an opportunity, and I'm just saying, have at it. Tell us. I appreciate as an administrator that you're looking at efficiencies, right? Looking at the process and where can we reduce times, and you talked about the dead time. I appreciated that. So from one administrator to another, I totally get it. I understand that, and I appreciate that. Are you giving people incentives, financial incentives for getting the various certificates? Larry, you're muted.
Is that better?
That's better.
My apology.
No worries.
Mayor Pro Tem, I have discussed many times with my staff and with also the city manager's office that our objective should be to incentivize and retain our skilled staff. It's a much better policy, in my opinion, than a continual recruitments. And so, yes, we've asked that if a person achieves a combination inspector status, that he be given a percentage increase on the salary to accommodate that certification.
So that's currently happening. Some or triple certification gets an increase each time, whatever via their salary. Oh, Larry, unmute again.
Sorry, yes, we have 2 folks that have achieved that status.
Well, it would be really helpful also as far as your PowerPoints where you've listed the number of inspectors, the total, but how many of them have the certain certification so we can see that. I think that would be a help to me. I've also sat in a couple of meetings, at least with you, Larry, when there have been difficulties with owners and an owner going for either a rehab or a new space, where we've talked about this issue of salaries, private versus government, and how that is driven. And in fact, we seem to be the ones that get that either they leave or they don't even consider because we don't have competitive salaries. So where are we at with that? Where have we been? I know that there's been some reluctance to raise the salary, but I don't see any other way. We need to be competitive, and I think we can be, especially with the kind of package that we have with insurance and the various things that the city offers.
Yes, Council, Mayor Pro Tem Condra, we obviously the HR department has completed their class and compensation study, I think about a year, perhaps 2 years ago. And of course, all the inspectors' classifications were involved with that. Usually where we run into difficulty in terms of compensation is that we require a certain number of years of experience, and to include, in some cases, a journeyman license. And in the trades, that, of course, is compensated with more money. Usually where we have our difficulty is we have our salary ranges for each of these classifications, and the entry level is not what they can experience in the industry. We also say, well, wait a minute, you have city benefits. You have health insurance, which is a big issue for most everyone these days. We outline those and we show them how it's equated to what would be dollars per hour equivalent. That helps a great deal. But I have to say it quite candidly, that most folks look at the paycheck they take home, and they'll even pass up the benefits in order to have the money that the industry provides them. That because of that, it's unfortunate, but we do find folks that recognize those benefits and they come to work for us.
Yeah, I definitely can relate and understand that, and I'm again advocating for a higher increase in salary for these folks, because I think recruiting and retaining them is so important, because you can't retain them because you're not competitive. I think that is a problem. And so you'd made mention about the electrical inspectors and having issues. You've talked about and so I'd like to ask if there has been any discussion about paid internship programs working with the university to be able to facilitate the recruitment and retaining of those individuals. It seems like that's been successful in utilities, the water inspection, and I saw a beautiful write-up about an individual who was an intern with utilities who got hired on, who currently works for utilities in the water treatment facility. So I think that we can show some strides as it relates to that, and I wondered if there had been any discussion or thought about that in that particular area.
Mayor Pro Tem, Tim Pitts again. We have discussed this with the community college, and we talked to them about the project, the program they have with utilities, and it's a great program, and we've had a few people go through it, and I'm very pleased. I wish we could do it. The problem is what's in the New Mexico Administrative Code about what your experience has to be in order to be a qualified, certified building inspector, and you need to have at least 3 years as a journeyman in the trade. So what we would have to do, and what we would have to do is get them through the program, get them to do 3 years in the field, and then we could bring them in. And as Larry says, we're already in that boat, that if we have somebody that's got 3 years as a journeyman, they're already, I mean, we were having people on the electrical inspector position saying we're already making $10 an hour over what you're willing to give us. And the one we hired took a pay cut to come work for us. And but for him, it was, as Larry said, I mean, for some of them, it's when you got young kids, the ability to know that you can be home at 6 o'clock, the ability to know that you can have Christmas off, or have let's say Labor Day off because you know your kids are off and you want to be able to do things with them. That probably more than anything was the thing. But what you're talking about, absolutely correct. We would love to do it. We will continue to work on that. We ran into that problem that the CID is only willing to go so far in their certification. They might give them a year and a half if they had that degree or something like that. So and maybe that's something that Larry and I should, when we got the current electrical inspector, Larry and I drove up to Albuquerque to meet with the director of CID, and we managed to get him on board, certified in the field within 6 weeks. The normal process is 6 months. So that's how we managed to do it. I mean, we doing what you're talking about, turning over every corner and turning over a stone and say, what can we do to make this thing go faster? I'll drive the guy's resume up to you if you'll make a decision on the spot. And
so is there a legislative response, Dr. Pitt, Larry, that we can work on working with our state delegation to change? Because you said it's like an administrative code, if you will. I would assume that it would need to be a law change in order for, maybe there needs to be a step process, because there feels like there's a bottleneck. And I can definitely appreciate that, because we had lots of problems and continue to have problems with capacity around social workers and counselors, with social workers specifically. And so we did a lot of work around that, but that required some legislative response and different things. So I guess I'm just trying to forecast vision with you, and trying to use, what experiences I have legislatively to help, because that's where I keep hearing over and over that the construction industry honestly can be a barrier to some things, and it doesn't make sense to me. If our GRT comes from that why shouldn't we work with our state legislators, to craft a bill that works for everybody, because I doubt we're the only ones that are having this problem.
Mayor Pro Tem, I agree with you that's probably an avenue we need to go down. We need to be very careful that we don't, and I'm sure that this is the same in social work. There's a reason why there's a bottleneck, and that's because you want people that know what they're doing. And the same is true in building inspections. I don't want to send out an inspector that doesn't know what he's doing. I want an inspector that's going to say, no, that's unsafe. Here's why it's unsafe. Here's what you need to do differently.
Sure.
And so we need to be very careful that we do it in such a way that it allows qualified people to get through the system without also allowing unqualified people to get the certification and start doing inspections and really hurting the industry. So that would be the only caution, but I agree with you, and we very much would appreciate your help.
Okay. And then on page 10, you talked about the interactive videos. I'm really excited that the innovation that you created here within the city of Las Cruces to do that, and I think even more so now with the pandemic, how helpful that's going to be. To explain a little more in detail, there is specific inspections that you do, or all can be inspected via video? And is all of your inspectors trained and feel comfortable and confident doing that?
Mayor Pro Tem, all of our inspectors, our current inspectors, are trained and do have the equipment to perform the IV, we call them IV interactive video inspections. This is something that we want to increase and utilize more. particularly for the re-inspections. And I think that's going to, we're almost going to be 100% on re-inspections with IVI. But to answer your question, all staff is equipped and trained to utilize the IVI. And just a side note, the Las Cruces building program is the most innovative building program in the state of New Mexico. I can say that with confidence. I'm president of the Southern New Mexico Building Officials Association. I'm also on the International Code Council board of directors for the region, Colorado and Arizona, New Mexico and Texas and Utah. And we have presented our program to them, and they've said, wow, you guys are ahead of the game, and you're really being very innovative. We're going to continue that. But for the IVI, it's going to be a program that's going to be increase our efficiencies and reduce the delays in inspection.
Now, is all of your inspectors feel comfortable and confident using the IVI?
Tim, you want to take that one?
I got a reaction from
Sure. Let's just say it took one of our inspectors, his wife came down with symptoms, and we said, oh, you got to stay home for 14 days. And he said, well, does that mean I can't work? And I said, well, if you want to do IVI, and he's, all right, I'll try it. And Larry gets a text the next morning, this is great. This works so well.
Good. Good. Okay,
It was a little, and the same on the contract. Construction people are conservative people. You know, they don't like a lot of change, but once you get them going, they jump in, you know, both feet forward, and they adopt it. So as I tell you, I love this industry, and these guys, once you get them going, they'll adopt it and they'll use it for everything.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I've sort of heard that not everybody is comfortable using it, and there's been some challenges with that. But it's good to hear that, you know, nothing, I've been saying this a lot, nothing like a pandemic to get us, you know, past a certain space to move into a different strategy that we've been talking about, but people have been kind of humming and, you know, like, no, I don't really want to do it. So cool. And then just,
Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sorry for interrupting. Can I let, looks like David Maestas has a quick comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem. I wanted to talk with you specifically about your questions, comments, and concerns with CID. One of the things that I will do is start a discussion, at least a regular meeting with the bureau chief that oversees the CID, and that way we can work with them on whatever collaborations we might be able to assist them with, whatever inspections that we might be able to actually take over if they allow that. And whatever we might be able to do to help facilitate and expedite inspections that we are waiting on with them for. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that is something I will be looking into and working on.
I remember us talking about it at our individual staffing, David. That was one of the things that we agreed you could do. So thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just from Councilor Beita-Stuvi's comment about Isela and sort of the time frames with a developer, an owner, a developer, maybe the subcontractors. I do know that we've had some issues specifically when someone comes in and that someone happens to be a developer. To get a permit then and all the various things that are required, deadlines and whatever, there is a space for the owner, right, to be a part of that process, to get updates. And many times I've understood some of our developers don't want to have that clearly stated. And so I wondered if you've sort of changed your process or protocols to include the owner so that they get deadlines, because it feels like communication is such an issue when you have second and third party people and the owner's sort of like, what's going on? And I know Larry and I have had at least a couple of times that has happened. And so when you include the owner in that process and they get natural updates, that's important. But I didn't think it was happening regularly.
And yes, Pro Tem Gondara, you and I have had those discussions with owners. Our permitting process, it's basically regulated, but the communication for the permit, the request for inspections, the request for information does go through the permit applicant. And that the reason being is the permits are issued to licensed personnel, licensed contractors. Now, that doesn't prevent the owner from learning information. And as the mayor noted earlier, that through the Settle portal, they can see what the applicant is doing in terms of inspection request, inspection status, comments that might be needed to be answered by their design professionals. But we do not schedule inspection requests an owner that is not the applicant. That's the way we are able to track and keep record of the activity.
Okay.
I
guess I think it would be important to include the owner, because that's where I see a lot of problems exist, is because there's a lack of communication, and then they blame the city. So I would ask for you to look into that in hopes that you would include the owner as part of that communication thread. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dr. Pitts, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. If as I said, we have this new commercial review coordinator position, and I'm feeling like that is a good position. As Larry says, the problem we have in the permits themselves is the licensed contractor is the one that has the right to that permit. And one of the problems we've had in the past is when people who are not the licensed contractor call in for the inspection, and we show up and they're not ready for the work to be inspected, who's responsible? Is it right for us to charge them a reinspection fee when they never called it in? So we run into legal aspects of the contractor permit responsibility and status. However, having and we tried to work with this, Donald Bustos, he's been very helpful to us, and we try to have him work with people. The problem is Donald doesn't really know the permitting process real well. So I believe that the commercial review coordinator, working very closely with Donald, we can get much better communication going out. We have one place to go for information, one person, if the owner wants to call in and find out where things are, there's one person to talk to. Or two, you can call Donald, you can call our new commercial review coordinator, but they will work together to do this. So I think there may be an avenue to get to what you're talking about. And, you mentioned before that, and I think Councilor Vasquez mentioned this as well, there's people who don't really know the process, and we've got to help them out. And we've got to help them negotiate it better than where it is right now. And so that we're hopeful that this is going to be I've used this in another place I work, and I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference to have a single person point of contact.
So with this commercial, sorry, Mayor, Dr. Pitt's reply or response got me thinking a little bit. Is this commercial person would have those inspections and have sort of authority to talk with your inspectors?
In a sense, that person would be a super permit tech. They would be somebody that knew the permit tech position real well. How do we issue permits? How do the permits go out? What are the limitations? What are the steps that need to be taken? And and that's what they would have. They would have this experience with the actual day-to-day. How do you get where you're trying to get? And
Right.
and we're leaving it a little bit open. I want that person to kind of define the role a little bit, because I want some innovation out of them. I want to see them come into a position, take it on and say, you know, Tim, we really got to be doing this. This is of the 6 people I saw last week, 5 of them had this problem. So let's see if we can fix that. And so that's really where that comes from. And they will know the process intimately.
Sounds exciting. I look forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Dr. Pitts, is that Heisenberg there in your office?
It is indeed. And it's
Okay. Yeah, good
better
picture.
call Saul as well.
Okay. I figured so. Good show. Councilor Bencomo?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you both, Larry and Tim. I appreciate all this information and learning from you all about all of this process. In my one-to-one check-ins with our interim city manager, I requested some of this information that gets given to us anyway, and specifically about districts, and I wanted to learn more about some of these things happening in District 4. And so I really appreciate you accommodating that and giving me that information. I really appreciate it. As I was pulling up the document, I want to ask you a couple questions about it, because there's some things I found really interesting. But first, I want to just clarify for my own learning. So last March, you had 430, you issued 430, in this March, you have 742, is that correct?
See, Mayor and Councilor Bencomo, I don't have that number in front of me, but I do recall the report. And I believe that is correct, what you're saying there. Yes.
And that's really impressive. That's really incredible. And 742 permits issued in the month of March is really, really impressive. I'm curious about, and then I hear you talk, I hear you say that perhaps you don't think you need any more inspectors, but that seems like a really big caseload. Does that feel like supportive, and does that feel like your inspectors are able to handle that?
And Councilor Bencomo, we track this religiously, and I said every month that we have that construction report. In addition to it just being interesting information for not only the Economic Development Department and the councilors and the mayor, it also gives us an opportunity to be able to go to the city manager and the city manager's office and say, based on this trend, it's not just an anomaly. It wasn't just a period of a few days. This has been going on for several months, and we're able to identify. I use the word, whenever your activity goes into a double-digit percentage, I call it exponential. And so if we're seeing this exponential growth in activity, we need to be requesting additional resources. In this case, either additional staff or additional technology that enables us to address that exponential growth. And we'll be doing that.
Good.
And can I add to that, Councillor? This isn't the only innovation we're doing. We also have, with our existing budget, we've been buying new equipment for our staff, so they have better equipment for the field. And we're also trying to better utilize the technology we have. We're trying to get the software to do some of their work for them. 15 years ago, when we were doing 2,000 houses a year, we had 12, I think that's right, 12 inspectors, plus a building official, plus so we probably had 15, where now we have 12. And you don't want to get overstaffed either, because what ended up happening when we had that many staff, and then in 2007 the home building went to virtually nothing. We were down Even as late as 2014, we were doing 240 homes a year. 240 homes. I mean, people were bored. We had inspectors that didn't have anything to do, and that's a management problem too. I trust me. Trying to keep somebody that's bored from sleeping in their truck is not always an easy job. So it's not all. You got to balance it. You got to make sure that you're not. Yeah, I don't want them overworked, but I don't want them underworked either. I think we got to be good stewards of the resources we're given, and I think, and so that's why I think the technology gives us a little bit more room, especially to purchase it in these good times when we have lots of revenue from our building permits. Purchase the technology now so that in the bad time we don't have to. I don't want to be carrying a bunch of labor costs in a time when maybe. Because who knows? I mean, as a result of what's going on right now, maybe nobody buys another home for 2 years, and we're all in trouble. I don't want to be there. I don't want to just you gave us permission to hire 4 new people, and now I'm going. I don't have any work for you. I got to let you go. So anyway, we have other innovations that we're doing. We are definitely using our resources as efficiently and as effectively as we can.
Thank you, Dr. Pitts. I really appreciate you saying that. I think that's, I think it's an important thing to say. Quick question. As I was going through this report, which is very easy to read, by the way, I really appreciate that. In the different types of projects that you provide, there's permits issued for windows/doors. What does that mean?
Well, I can take that, Counselor. The folks often realize that some of the older properties, albeit a resident or a commercial building, they want to increase the energy efficiency. They may have an older single pane window that has a lot of heat loss, heat gain through it, and they want a new window. But we have found that many times the window we want to become larger, and if they do that, it has some additional framing that's needed. So we ask them to get a permit so that we can make sure that the framing is correct to support the loading that's placed on the structural support above the window.
Gotcha.
And so that's why we issue that type of permit.
Got it. Thank you. I think as a new homeowner, I've owned my first home for a year. There's, I often think about, oh my God, what are the things that I don't even know yet, that I don't know, that I need to do, that are coming down, that what rules have I broken already because I didn't know, right? And I think about all those things, and from this conversation, what I'm hearing is that I have to trust that whoever I hire to do something will know those rules, right? So do we have a process that perhaps this is a conversation too with Ms. Green on, like, how do we ensure that homeowners especially understand a lot of these things, not just, and because of this, a lot of this conversation is focused around industry people, right? And those folks, that's their job, they're supposed to know. But what about folks that they're just starting their new business, or people like me who just bought their new home, right? Like, what is the communication line between you all, the department, and some of these folks?
If I could take that, I'd appreciate it. Counselor, thank you. I think our staff, our inspectors, they care very much about building safety. This is a very important part of their life. That's part of why they became inspectors. It's not just money. It's because they love building, and they love making sure that people live in a safe environment. And if you listen to them passionately, they talk about that. You would be amazed, and you learn a lot. I learn a lot from every one of them every time. You say, "What does that matter?" Well, here, blah blah blah, and they go off on this thing about it. So I think that's something that we have dabbled with. What you're talking about, we've dabbled with over the years, and every time we have enough staff to start doing something, it's either too busy and we don't have time to do it, or it's too it's slow, and our big goal is to get, we gotta reduce staff or something like that. So we always, go between those. But I think that's something that the staff and the building safety program would very much love to do. Larry and I talked with the grants office last year about what it was called the Pool Safely Grant. Pool Safely Grant. And it was for a program manager to run a pool safety program. How do you have a safe pool? And I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you have a pool in your house, that is the single most deadly thing to children. And there are rules and regulations, and I would recommend, especially if you have young children, that you follow those as closely as you can, because it's not just drowning; it's getting your hair caught in the pump system. It's falling from on the concrete and so on. And we wanted to do a whole program that would go out to the schools, teach kids how to behave properly in a pool. Where are your danger points, and so on. So we weren't successful with that grant, but if they open that up again, we very much would like to apply for it and bring someone in. That would get us down the road of what you're talking about. How do we do some education for people on how do you have a safe home?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I appreciate you saying that about the pool safety. I think that's a small piece of sort of what I'm trying to get at. And I would love to see something like this, create something like this. So if however I can be supporting that, I think that's important. And again, I think just as a new homeowner, how much easier it was than I thought originally, right? But then there's now all these other things that I have to worry about that I'm like learning as I go. And I would love to provide that kind of support for new homeowners in our city, for sure. And perhaps maybe it's in those months that you have projected as lower permit months that we can, when they're sleeping in their trucks. I'm just kidding. But I think I would love to see something like this come to life. I think it'd be really important and feel really supportive for our residents. What you mentioned that fire also does inspections. Is that in supplement to the inspectors that you listed in your presentation, or do they do a whole, when fire gets called to do inspection, is that because they have a whole different set of things they're looking at?
Councilor Bencomo, it's the fire inspections, utility inspections. They are in addition to the inspections that we listed. Ours are very much particular to the building structures more than utilities. And then, of course, the code compliance, there again is another group of inspectors that were not included in the number that was on the presentation.
So then when you say one-stop shop, does that include all of those folks too? Or is it a one-stop shop just for the community development department of inspectors?
Councilor, the nomenclature of one-stop shop was an effort that many jurisdictions have undertaken so that people don't have to take their plans to several different locations for them to be distributed and reviewed. So we collect those, we separate them, and we send them to the 8 agencies that will be looking at them. Then we collect their comments and send them out. And similar for inspections. So that's how the one-stop shop was designed and how it functions. But there are also inspections that they do, particularly the utility department for gas and water lines and solid waste that were, not in the figures that we gave you today.
Okay. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor. Thank you both so much.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Sword?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay now?
Yep.
Yeah, Comcast dropped me here a while back, but I did catch most of what you all were saying. And I just picked up a few things just here lately that Councilor Bencomo talked about that I thought were quite interesting. She was talking about other projects or other work to be done on a house other than just buying it. Just to let her know, in the last few years, not too long, I've replaced 3 windows in my house, a sliding glass door, 2 roofs, and an HVAC too. So I've got a lot of experience in that. If you have any questions, Councilor Bencomo, I'll be glad to help you out. Tell you what I did wrong. Okay, so, and then too, the most important thing I thought you were mentioning is that about the future of inspectors and staffing and so on and so forth that you all have been talking about a lot. I just want to remind everybody, our future is in big doubt right now. We don't know what's going to happen with the result of this COVID-19. And so we can't make any big changes at the moment until we get a good handle as what we're going to end up doing here. The housing industry may just come to a standstill. It may not, but we just have to be prepared for as many scenarios as possible. As you were talking there, I was thinking back when I first got in the council. That was just at the beginning of the last recession. And I was pretty proud of our city staff being able to go through that whole recession without any furloughs or layoffs. The housing, the building industry came to near a standstill then, and yet they were able to manage it so that we were able to do it. So I give my hats off to our community development department, Mr. Nichols and Dr. Pitts. I think you're doing a fantastic job, especially with the things I've seen today, the ways you're trying to handle problems that have come up in the past. Yes. So there again, I just want to caution and the city council to be careful and wait. Let's wait and see what's going to happen here in the next few months to see where we're going to be at and with our whole city government. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, well, thank you, Councilor. Before we get to the next item, Councilor Bencomo, just a couple things. Sinking fund and termites is not covered by your insurance, so just a couple things. All right. Number 2 is going to be our energy, Las Cruces energy transition. And I believe Dr. Martinez and Lisa LaRock might be presenting both. Might be both presenting. And there's Lisa. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. I'm sharing my screen now.
Okay.
So, good afternoon, Mayor, Council, City Manager, and staff, and others listening. My name, for the record, is Lisa LaRock. I'm the Sustainability Officer for the City of Las Cruces. Before I begin my presentation, I wanted to take advantage of this moment and really thank the leadership during this pandemic. You have made everyone in the community feel safe and secure. And as one of those members, I wanted to thank you. So today I will be presenting the energy transition for Las Cruces. The shocks and stressors that we feel indicate existing system failures. With the pandemic, we see that the global economy and our health and well-being and the natural world are interconnected. And climate change shows many of these interconnections as well. We can learn from these systems failures to create a resilient, equitable, and thriving community. And it can be an opportunity to reset these systems to utilize ecological services, enhance community spaces and local talents, and invest in the health and vitality of all of our residents. The values just described are also manifested in sustainability practices, and the intersection of equity, economics, environment, are always woven through the work. Sustainability is also embedded in many of the plans the council has adopted, such as Elevate, Community Blueprints, the Active Transportation Plan, Water Conservation Plan, and others. And for the past year, with the assistance of a consultant, Lotus Sustainability and Engineering, a steering committee and stakeholders have been working on a climate action plan as a guiding document for the energy transition. And in the next few years, the Sustainability Office will expand its work to develop a resiliency plan, another specialized sustainability plan, to better adapt to the shocks and stressors we're facing. Today, I'm here to talk to you about climate action plan in the context of the energy transition. In the next 25 years, the sources and sectors of energy will change dramatically. This is a bar of the US energy from 2017. You can see that renewable energy and nuclear power make up less than 20% of the sources. In the next 25 years, fossil fuels either need to be developed that so that they're carbon-free technologies, or more likely be replaced with renewable energy. So that gold box that you see will all be replaced with renewable energy or new technologies. If you consider the different sectors where energy is consumed, transportation, industry, and residential and commercial building will be powered by electricity. That means that those red boxes will all be part of the electric grid. That is a huge change as well. So I'd like to paint a quick picture of what the energy transition will look like and what it will affect. Today, energy generation comes mostly from fossil fuels and often large central generators. In 25 years, we can expect 0 greenhouse gas emissions and a mix of central and local generation and storage and distributed energy. Utilities will be orchestra leaders of energy. And when we consider energy distribution, today we think of energy being delivered to a consumer and using a meter to determine costs. In 25 years, energy will be multi-directional. Everyone will be producers and consumers or prosumers. Real-time metering will be smart meters that will drive real-time energy management to lessen our energy use and our demand. When we consider energy use in our buildings today, we think of fossil fuels, standard efficiency, and are okay with wasteful behaviors. In 2025, and we won't have a carbon footprint, and we will be amazed at our efficiency and our behaviors. You will have a lot of stories to tell your grandchildren. Now I'd like to put this into the context of Las Cruces. I will start by describing the first couple of steps in the process: quantifying energy and emissions and identifying the benefits. At the end of the presentation, I'll discuss the other steps listed here. This is the Las Cruces greenhouse gas, or GHG, that's going to be your new initials that you have to learn, emissions, but by sector in 2018. We started the inventory in 2019, so we went back to 2018, the last full calendar year. This inventory includes all GHG emissions for residents, businesses, and municipality. It looks at operating costs, but it does not look at life cycle costs of mining, transporting, and disposing of fuels and other materials. It does not include NMSU, although they are also producing their own greenhouse gas baseline with the Lotus Consulting Group as well. And it does not include Doña Ana County. As you can see, 53% of greenhouse gases come from transportation. This represents a larger share than is seen in many communities our size. This may be a consequence of the development pattern of the city over the past decades that has prioritized traveling by car over other alternative options. Emissions from electricity and natural gas in the residential and commercial sectors comes in at 38, the 21 and 17%, which is slightly lower than what is seen in other communities our size. Half of the emissions are from electricity, the other half is from natural gas. The carbon emission factor is a little lower than in other New Mexico investment-owned utilities because El Paso Electric does not source any of its electricity from coal, which lowers our overall emission rate. As an aside, the next largest sector is the creation and disposal of solid waste in the community. That's 7%. Industrial processes like refrigerants and wastewater treatment processes make up a small fraction of the emissions. We're also in the process of doing a specific study of just municipal greenhouse gas emissions. I can tell you at this point that the municipal government contributes about 10% of the emissions in the graph you're looking at right now. And like this graph, half of the municipality's greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation. Before we began developing strategies, a steering committee identified important community benefits that also needed to be included alongside greenhouse gas emission reductions. The community values include resilience, innovation, health, access to services, green jobs, and a circular economy. A circular economy is when you design out waste and pollution and keep products and materials in use. The community values are noted with each strategy. Members of the steering committee developed emission reduction targets for 2030 and 2050 based on their perception of the municipality and community's readiness for such a shift. The Excel spreadsheets developed for this exercise model the impact of the reduction, as I'll show you later. So with this slide, with the transportation sector, nearly 99% of the emissions are generated by local drivers, 65% who use gasoline, 34% who use diesel gas. Participants in our exercises identified 4 transportation strategies. Increase the use of public transportation by 15% in 2030 and 35% in 2050. Develop active transportation alternatives like bike lanes and walking paths by 12% by 2030 and 40% by 2050. Connecting transportation and local growth, although this didn't have a target, we were cognizant that the urban sprawl can contribute to transportation use. And the 4th strategy, to inclusively promote electric vehicle adoption, which you'll see later has a significant impact on reducing greenhouse gases. It's important to remember that these strategies apply to all members of the city, not just the municipality. The transportation strategy strongly supports resiliency, health, access, and green jobs, innovation with the EV adoption. In the building sector, we mapped all groups. There's a strategy for the municipality to examine energy efficiency strategies beyond the low-hanging fruit of lights and HVAC systems and examine how we can manage demand during peak hours. This will be aided by smart technologies that we anticipate seeing in the next decade. There are also strategies to expand residential energy programs, especially for low and moderate income communities, to decrease their cost burdens and ensure their safety and health. This is even more important as we live through this pandemic. A 3rd strategy encourages the commercial sector to improve their energy use. And the fourth strategy inches towards electrifying buildings for those buildings that use low-cost renewable energy. By 2050, we recognize that electricity, wherever it is generated, will become the new normal. Building strategies will support resiliency, innovation, green jobs, and a circular economy. Discussing renewable energy is a little complicated. In 2018, EPE had 3% renewable energy in its portfolio. With the passage of the New Mexico Energy Transition Act, the ETA, investment-owned utilities like El Paso Electric are now required to generate 50% of their total retail sales from renewable energy sources by 2030 and 100% of its retail sales from clean energy, which also includes nuclear, by 2045. So my earlier prediction about how electricity and energy sources will change will easily come true because of the Energy Transition Act. This is truly an amazing push towards zero carbon energy, but it still doesn't mean it's affordable for everyone. For example, this month, the city is actively intervening in a Public Regulation Commission case to argue against El Paso Electric's proposed new gas generation facility as unnecessary and a likely stranded asset, leaving ratepayers to cover these costs. The city's participation in utility cases is an important tool to address climate in a system level. Finding ways to help low and moderate income households get solar for their homes will decrease their utility costs and not subject them to rate increases that we have come to expect. In 2018, there was about 20 megawatts of distributed renewable energy used by residents, businesses, and municipality. 20 megawatts is equal to the whole amount, is equal to the amount of electricity city government currently uses. But Las Cruces avoided 0.5% of the community's total emissions profile through this on-site solar because El Paso Electric owns the renewable energy credits, the RECs associated with this renewable energy production. It is credited to EPA's El Paso Electric's energy portfolio. Our renewable investments are added to and lower EPE's emission factors. In the waste sector, all the waste we create and dispose of emits greenhouse gases. Our strategy is to minimize or produce less waste. Possible actions including reusing construction materials, encouraging composting, focusing on food waste, diverting underutilized edible food to community members in need. That's just a few. And this is going to be a complicated graph, but I'll walk you through it, I promise. This graph illustrates the impact of the 9 strategies I just presented. Keep in mind, even though we set some big targets, their impact on greenhouse gas emissions may not be proportional. These strategies are equally valuable, though, because they serve other important community benefits. The municipal use, reducing municipal energy use, represents about 10% of all of the overall energy consumed in the district, as I told you before. And the city meeting its greenhouse gas targets will benefit taxpayers by reducing city energy costs, and it will allow us to meet our commitment to generate 25% of the city's own electricity from renewable energy by 2022, 50% by 2030, and 100% by 2050. And our own successes in meeting these targets will also provide demonstrable initiatives that will encourage similar successes in the community at large. Residential and commercial energy efficiency, the next the second and third bars will not have that significant of an impact on greenhouse gas emissions, but it will lower bills, provide jobs, and it will make the investment in solar less expensive because you can downsize the solar system. The fourth set of bars show you that electrifying buildings can have a sizable impact on greenhouse gas emissions, but it's dependent not only on transitioning to renewable energy, but making sure electricity rates are affordable for everyone. Consider how the cost of communication, cell phones, internet, cable networks, cyber security have skyrocketed in the past 20 years. If this were to happen in the energy transition, we will continue to see great disparities for our frontline communities. I've already talked about solar adoption. These bars just illustrate the impact of the Energy Transition Act on residents. It doesn't necessarily represent the community benefits we all aspire to. Increasing public transportation use will not have a big impact on greenhouse gas emissions. However, it's an example where community benefits are paramount. I'm very impressed with the impact of prioritizing active transportation like bikes, trails, ADA accessibility. The community benefits are also terrific, increasing health outcomes, building social cohesion, and really appreciating the place that you live. Promoting an inclusive electric vehicles will have a big impact on greenhouse gas emissions, but also has a big impact on renewable energy production. It's interesting to note that the decrease in auto, gasoline, and diesel emissions with the pandemic has significantly improved the solar generation, where the inverters are all working at maximum capacity. And I've also touched on the waste and incentivizing waste minimization, so I'll move on from there. This graph helps you understand the impacts of the targeted strategies by 2030. The first column shows how our greenhouse gas emissions in 2018, almost reaching just over 900,000 tons of greenhouse gas equivalents. The small red bar in the second column shows us if we continue with business as usual, the city's emissions will increase another 8%. The next four orange bars show you the percent decrease for that sector. Building energy strategies decrease emissions by almost 2%. Renewable energy and transportation strategies each contribute almost 12% and waste about 2%. By 2030, if we follow these targets, we will have decreased emissions by 19%, as well as contributing to a host of community benefits. This graph tells you the same story for 2050. You can see the impacts of more ambitious targets that will be in line with the energy transition technologies we expect to be seen in the upcoming decades. All told, we will decrease Las Cruces' greenhouse gas emissions by almost 73%, which is very impressive given that the Paris Climate Agreement that the city supports is 80% by 2050. Tackling climate change and the energy transition is a process. We've accomplished, and I've just explained, the first two steps. We have the next three in motion. We have the next three in motion, and that will push us to the final two. To understand the energy system, steps 3 through 5, It requires identifying the key players and the political and legislative landscaping. Characterizing our sphere of influence is about us determining our degree of interest, influence, or control over the energy system. And identifying opportunities and barriers is self-explanatory. Our approach to this transition must be thoughtful and deliberate. I've included the Climate Action Plan in your packets. It describes the data and the broad strategies and targets and includes an appendix of action ideas brought out by our stakeholder groups. The actions need more development and community input, but I would encourage the council to move this process forward with the following actions. I recommend that the City Council adopt the 2030 and 2050 Climate Action Plan targets with accompanying community benefits, that the City Council use the policy review committees to develop and advance energy transition plans and policies, that the city staff incorporate energy transition targets and benefits in utility work, renewable energy, transportation, buildings, and waste sectors, and that the city staff continue to participate in community engagement processes to develop and achieve the targets. So that's my story of energy transition for the next 25 years. I hope it's been helpful to the council, and I stand for questions.
Thank you, Lisa. That was very good. It's very comprehensive, and I know Councillor Sorg would like to have some comments and then Councillor Vasquez. And before I turn it over to Councillor Sorg, I just want to take a moment to thank him for his longtime advocacy and leadership on energy issues, Councillor, ever since I've met you, since you've come on board. I think it was, what, 2009? I can't remember if it was around there. But you and Councillor Nathan Small and Councillor Pedrosa were instrumental in helping form the sustainability position that Lisa LaRocque now holds. And so, and I know you pushed for the renewable energy sources by 2022 at, I believe, at 25%. And then by 2030, 50%, and 100% by 2050. Which is about the time I think you and I will probably be off the council. So, so thanks for your advocacy on that. And so, Councillor Sorg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for all those kind comments. Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple points, mainly to thank Lisa for all the work she's done on this. I have sat in on a couple of those meetings that they had, and there was a lot of going back and forth on just how we could possibly do it, different scenarios that different people in the committee would bring up. I think they worked very hard and were very dedicated to all that. Yeah, I want to say a word about the electric vehicles. As you saw from the presentation, the majority of the greenhouse gas do come from our vehicles. And I realize that living in a spacious Western community where you have things that are far away from each other and have to get transportation that is convenient for that, and that's usually the family car or pickup truck or trucks in general. There's manufacturers, though, in the country and indeed in the world that are moving towards building electric vehicles. If you've heard what China is doing, China is going whole hog on electric vehicles. They are building them far faster than anybody else in the world. And being a Toyota owner, I've been told that by our Toyota dealer that by 2025, all of Toyota's models will have electric options. And so, so they're coming. And so I just want to be ready mentally for that time when we can move to more electric vehicles. There's other actions. There's these are the kind of actions that Lisa outlined that we need to take in the future here as we go along. And I would anxious to get going on them as soon as we can, because that's the only way we're going to combat climate change. And if we can reduce our climate change in our country and our world, we'll have less of a problem in the future having enough water for ourselves and for our crops, our food, and so forth. But I want to say one last thing about this, and it's something that we in Las Cruces are not going to be able to do alone by any measure, is the cost of not greenhouse, but cost of fossil fuels. The price of natural gas right now is so low that it just does not compete hardly with anything else. Nothing else competes with it, I mean. And as you heard last week, the price of oil has gone negative. They are paying people to take it off their hands, just temporarily though. That is going to change shortly. But still, it's going to be so cheap. And so there needs to be a change in the price of fossil fuels to help this go along. So I hope we continue in the future to work towards that goal of having a more equitable cost of fossil fuels, the oil and natural gas, the real costs when it comes to climate change. So thank you, Mayor. And again, thank you, Lisa, for that excellent presentation.
Thank you, Councilor Vasquez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Lisa. Good to see you. And thank you for a great presentation. So happy that you've been able to develop this plan. I was looking at the report made in working with Lotus Consultants earlier today as well. And that's a wonderful report that I just think we should show to other cities, that we should really be proud of in terms of what we were able to put together with that working group and with your work, Lisa, and the consultants. I think we're kind of a model city in that sense, especially being located in a very unique place in the Southwest Desert, as Councilor Sorg mentioned, with a lot of limitations, including water. Anyhow, I think today, as we speak, right, construction has started on the Nevada Cooling Corridor, which is a project, Lisa, that I know you brought forward, working with community, working with neighbors, working with a bunch of different partners to address this issue of equity in very many ways, right? It's the hottest street, I think the hottest urban heat island in the city, and it's also in one of the more low-income areas of the city. And I think all the concrete that we've built out across different parts of the city create, these conditions with heat islands, and figuring out how to mitigate them in an equitable way that also promotes, for example, rain harvesting, cooling of neighborhoods through the use of different types of landscaping that's both suitable for our community but also drought tolerant. Is part of the innovation, I think, that helps to tie in this issue of equity and climate change and sustainability. And I love that we are leading with projects like that. So that's something I'm so really happy to see. Also, just want to address the community solar portion of things, also in relation to equity. I know that's something that we have advocated for and supported in the past, at least at the state level, for the legislature to allow a community solar bill to go through that would decentralize the way that power sharing across large solar fields is really driven, right? Not by the corporations or not by necessarily private utilities, but by municipalities, would be a huge benefit to starting to get affordable solar on people's homes and apartment complexes and places where people rent. And so I think that's a huge thing for us to continue to push for at the local level, for the state change that I think could be transformational, not just for our community, but for other cities as well, to make solar affordable. So I know that's at the top of your list, Lisa. I just want to remind us that fight is still ongoing. And obviously the utilities don't particularly like it. They don't want it. But but that's okay. Like you said, we intervene where we have to for our people, for our customers, for our constituents, and that's a really important bill for us to continue to advocate for. I think Councillor Sorg also made another, I think, good note about as we get away potentially, like you said, 78% or lower greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 means that the demand for fossil fuels is going to keep going down, not just in our community, but really around the country. And so thinking about the revenue that comes into our state, right? Almost a third or more of our revenue that comes from oil and gas and the fossil fuel industry that currently powers our state government. Thinking about what our role is in helping to diversify the state's economy at the same time that we're diversifying away from oil and gas and putting more electric vehicles on the road and that kind of thing will be an important part of how we lead as a city. And so that means job creation through clean industries. And so that's something I'm really interested in, and also having to be a part of this discussion. And natural gas is another one that I know Councillor Sorg and I have talked about. We have this. I think we had kind of a dilemma with this big natural gas expansion out in Talavera just recently. That was approved by the Las Cruces Utilities Department, right? And it's to add potentially new customers, right? Put them online to get new customers and gas out to folks out in that particular neighborhood, which is outside the city limits. But regardless, those folks would be in our customer service area, knowing that also natural gas is not the future, right? Of the way that people are going to power their homes and people are going to heat their homes, right? We should probably be looking to electrifying homes so that they're actually being heated by electric heaters that are powered by solar energy, or that kind of technology that's already out there in terms of the electrification of homes is the future, right? So how much should we invest in things like expanding natural gas lines and natural gas projects as a city, knowing that it's kind of runs counter to what we're really trying to do, but also brings revenue that's immediately needed by the utilities. And so that's something that will be really interesting, Lisa, with the work that you're doing and our utilities being enterprise funds, and how we're going to potentially make sure that we have revenue to bring in to make those utilities sustainable, but also make sure that they're getting away from the fossil fuel industries that currently make us money. So those are just some of my comments. I'm super happy about this plan, super grateful for your work, Lisa. I think this has a lot of really important elements, and so glad that you are keeping equity at the forefront of this. I think that's so important to be thinking about an energy transition, even municipally, at the local level, that doesn't leave anyone out, and what our role can be in making sure that we put our communities and our people first. So thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bencomo.
Thank you, Mayor. I mostly just have comments too. I don't have any questions. Lisa, thank you so much for your presentation. I also want to thank you. You've dedicated your career to this, and I think it shows. And often staff will come on here and I'll say how lucky I think we are to have you, and I think you're one of those people too. So I think Las Cruces is lucky to have you on our team. For sure. And one of the biggest reasons I wanted to be on the sustainability committee moving forward was because of this plan, and it was because of the city's commitment to climate action and to ensure that, like Councillor Vasquez says, equity stays at the center. Communities of color and low-income communities are disproportionately affected by climate change, by the effects of climate change, yet they're the least who contribute to climate change. And so I want to make sure that those voices are heard and represented as we move forward, and that, as we begin to move into electrifying our homes and those things, that the burden of cost does not fall on low-income communities or folks who might not be able to even afford those things. And and pushing for a more equitable conversation around electric vehicles and And I know that the gamut of cost for those is very wide ranging, but I've also seen what the cheaper electric vehicles look like. And just because you can't afford a Tesla doesn't mean you want an ugly car. So I think it's an important conversation to have about what all of these things mean, right? And that it shouldn't be middle upper class conversation that's being had around climate change, but that it includes all of our communities. So I'm really excited to be on the sustainability committee. I'm even more excited about it as I read through this incredible plan that that was in our attachments. And I know that we're going to be talking about Elevate Las Cruces pretty soon and thinking through some of those short-term goals that Elevate Las Cruces lays out for us. But I think that some of these strategies that are in the climate action plan we should also consider looking at some of these things as we begin to look at the short-term policies that Elevate Las Cruces laid out for us. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you. Councilor Flores. Councilor Flores.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much for your wonderful work and for having Lotus put the plan together. I thoroughly enjoyed working on it, and I look forward to it being implemented, and I know with you at the helm, it'll happen. I think that I agree with Councilor Vasquez, brought up very good points about, and Councilor Bencomo, the equity issue is very, very important. And I'm so happy that we are a model in many ways. And I think that Lotus did say in its report that Las Cruces is pretty much ahead of other communities this size insofar as actions that we've taken and what we're currently doing. So kudos to you, Lisa LaRocque, for your work on the Nevada corridor. I started to say that we are a community. The state of New Mexico is an impoverished state, and we're also Hispanic, Latinos, and you have a double whammy there. But I think that the city is moving forward beautifully with you at the helm. And again, I want to thank you. And as Councilor Vasquez brought up, we have to do work at the legislature too to make sure that some of the stuff is implemented. But thank you so much again, Lisa. Blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Yes, I'm proud to say that the city has been a leader in energy transition, and a lot credit, like I said, goes to Councilor Sorg and Councilor Small, Representative Small, Councilor Pedrosa, Mayor Pro Tem Emeritus Sharon Thomas, and a few others. So let's see who's next. Mayor Pro Tem Ganda.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Lisa, for your amazing presentation and work. I participated in some of that subgroup work. I was impressed with you and Lotus and the people who participated. I thought there was a wide range of folks that were invited to attend, and it was interesting to sort of move from the table and always feeling like, oh, we don't have enough time. But I thought the group that I participated in was very innovative in their discussions and brought up issues and concerns, especially around equity, but thinking of innovative ways, right, to move this into to continue to move the needle as it relates to climate change and reducing our greenhouse gas. One of the things that I didn't notice, and I know how difficult that is I didn't think I saw a school representative there at the meeting. And I wondered how we were going to incorporate them, especially around the food waste, like the waste piece. I think that's super important. And I think, I know that there's already a group working on that, but I think if you have had any conversations with the schools specifically about that.
Mayor Pro Tem Gandara, yes, during the process, we did cast a wide net, inviting a lot of different people. And although we had a good showing, the school was invited, but there were no representatives there. And I feel even though we had a really stimulating conversation, throwing out a lot of innovative ideas, each one of those different sectors demands a much longer, more thoughtful discussion with the people that will be most impacted as well. And so that's why the recommendations right now are just to adopt the targets. And then as we have those deeper conversations with people, that we will have strategies that overcome some of the barriers that that have stopped people from being able to take advantage of opportunities that are out there. So this is not the end of it. This is really just a point to reflect. And so I expect to see a lot more conversations and participants as we actually flesh out the plans. But thank you for the point.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think in my work in the past with Department of Health, when we've often changed food policies, right, we've worked with Department of Health and the schools using, they have health promotion specialists that work specifically on this. And so I would recommend reaching out to Don Sanchez and Gil Padilla. You know, Gil was the one that was highlighted in the newspaper doing a lot of his work, who is also a social worker, sort of directing people to go into the sites to get tested. And so it's just one of many things that he has done as it relates to public health. But I think, I know anytime we've wanted to change sort of things around what is in vending machines, less sugar, those kinds of things, it's been a sort of a dual work with the two of those entities. And we've often reached out to the nutritionists there at the department, at the school. So just some recommendations around that. I also noticed around utilities being an energy utility and all the emissions as it relates to, I wondered how we will begin, or how we'll continue to have conversations with Dr. Garcia about moving into that arena of being an energy utility, right? And what that might look like. Have there been discussions yet around that?
Mayor Pro Tem Gandara, there is, that certainly is a sector that we need to explore about utility scale energy. And I have received a lot of support from the utility department, and they have been active participants in the development of the climate action plan. So I think we are going to explore all the sectors and really look at the trade-offs from that. So we need to go through it thoughtfully, and I don't think that, I think our level of transition was pretty modest by 2030, but I think we can hit the ground running once we made a full decision about how we want to move forward. Oops, I can't hear you.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm really excited about that, and I know I'm anxious to continue to move in that direction with Dr. Garcia and his staff. I think it'll be an excellent opportunity for us. Lisa, around that graph that showed the transportation, that we're not going to see really any major increases, but what would public transportation. how would we be able to measure, though, with the purchase of the 5 electric vehicles, the 5 electric buses, that's making an impact?
Mayor and Pro Tem Gandara, I get into the weeds quickly, so I'll try to control myself with this explanation. The part of the issue is that ridership isn't that high, and there's not that many buses. So it's great that the buses will be electric, and it's super that this is an option for people to be able to use. But in the grand scheme of things, in terms of greenhouse gases, it's just a very small drop in a large fossil fuel bucket, or a lack of a drop. And so it doesn't really show up, but it doesn't preclude. We went in with the idea that, yes, we need to really think about how to help underserved populations, and that's why we kept it there. It's important to be there for that reason, and even the electric buses are great to have, but they're just not going to make a big impact. But I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying that compared to other strategies, their benefits are more about equity than they are about greenhouse gas.
Yeah, I know that in discussions with Jamie Rickman and in our policy committee, the Quality of Life Policy Committee, we have often talked about the use of transportation, especially, leveling the playing field for people who do not have that opportunity or choose not to have a vehicle, right, to get around town and whatnot. And so we talked a lot about campaigns with the schools, and so I know that conversation has sort of been put in the back burner, but I know that especially and unfortunately with the work that Jamie did with the schools, bringing the students and the youth in to do all of and you were a part of that, Lisa. You did that whole presentation. It was wonderfully received, and that sector actually won, right? And so they have some incredible ideas, the students. And so how do we tap into this student population that is very mindful and thoughtful about climate change and wants to have some action steps around that? And so I just want to remind us not to forget. I thought their presentation was amazing. The one that ended up winning, I thought that we have plans, Mayor, if I remember correctly, to honor them, the students that won, and have them do their presentation. And so I could see that very easily transforming actions for that. I'm getting some feedback. So, but I don't want us to forget that, because I think the student population is a very important piece to this as well, and a way to involve the schools in this process, because the kids want to be involved in it. Lastly is I would recommend that we talk to the community in the schools with our joint powers agreement with the schools. Yvonne and I and Councilor sit on this. I don't know why. And I wonder, doing this presentation to them, especially around equity, is maybe an avenue, right, to get the schools active and involved in this process. I think they'd be very interested. We have talked about food waste. I think more often than not, we talk a lot about policy around that, and how do we effectively mitigate those kinds of things. So I could see this being like an agenda item in that particular group as we move forward. So thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Mayor. Congratulations. I think it was an excellent presentation and a great report.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And we have a Councilor Beta Stubbe.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Lisa, for everything. I think my colleagues have pretty much summed up many of our questions, and I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem bringing up the schools and the active the students as well. I had my video off because I have too many kids coming in and out and saying hello. But it does bring the point, they're very engaged. Education is really important with them too. Training, I would say, the next generation so that these habits become automatic. You know, we struggle in our household sometimes with the little things, but they have those big picture views already in place. So I'm happy to help and partner up in any ways possible. And thank you so much for a great presentation.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Flores, did you have another comment or did you forget to put your hand down? Councilor Flores, oh, you.
Yeah, apologies, I looked it up accidentally.
Oh, okay, no problem. Okay, well, again, that's very good. And just a couple things, Lisa, I just want to say again, thank you very much for the presentation. Councilor Beta Stubbe, did you still want to say something or did you forget to put your hand down?
Nope, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, you're good. So I think, Lisa, I think you've heard the comments are very supportive of this. And I think what I'd like to see, council supportive of it, is for us to bring forth a resolution to adopt these targets and outline these benefits in this plan. Is that something there that you can maybe work on? And that way there we have it. We know what we're at. We know what we're going to do. We've seen these targets. We've seen the benefits outlined. And I think it's really a good time because it allows us to address the challenges of climate change. This allows us to set those clear priorities for our future decision making and where we're going to allocate those resources. I think it's good for the city that it saves us money, it saves our residents money, it provides a secure energy future, all the way from, you know, just the cost savings. But I also want to just take a quick moment when you stop and think about it. You know, this COVID-19 issue. I stop and think about how a few years back when we had that freeze and the city of El Paso was having some problems, and thanks to Dr. Garcia and his team, we still had water and we were still at it throughout that 48 hours that everything was frozen. But imagine if something was to happen now that maybe sabotage or a natural disaster, and imagine if we had on our water pumps solar, that would allow us to continue to maintain that water source throughout. So I think it's kind of really important. So is that something there you all are supportive of if we were to move forward and get a resolution to address this? Okay.
By all means, Mayor.
Yes, absolutely, Mayor. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, so looks like that's the case. And was that it, Lisa? Oh,
Yes,
I did want to say one thing that, and I don't know if you could provide us any update on this, but we're talking about cars and electric cars. And I know the biggest thing is the charging. So let's say, for example, you were a company and you had employees that go traveling a lot. That is obviously one of the best benefits is use electric cars. But the charging stations around the state or even in our city are somewhat limited. Do you have any update on how that's looking? I mean, if you could theoretically have charging of a car almost as quick as adding fuel, like gas, everyone would switch to electric vehicles in a heartbeat. You know, I mean, if there was a way to literally supercharge a car, it's a battery, so that you know, you can get 120 miles on it and things of this nature. What's really cool about this is if you use your car for business, you still get the 58.5 cents that the IRS allows you, and it doesn't cost you any money. You know, it doesn't cost you any gas. I mean, that's what's really neat. You know, when you stop and think about it, a lot of it comes down to money, savings. And if it's good to the environment, great. That's just that much more of a benefit. But I mean, a lot of consumers, you know, they look at the bottom line. So would you ever know anything on that? How are they developing vehicles to be able to be charged that quick instead of having to wait, you know, a long time?
Mayor, thank you for the question. There are abilities, there are different levels are referred to charging stations. The city just received a grant from the VW settlement money for 7 to 8 dual chargers. So that means that's 14 to 16 chargers that we'll be placing around different city properties. And the baseline average is that you should have a charger for one charger for every 10,000 people. And that will clearly change as adoption rates change. Those level 2 if they take up to 2 hours if your battery is almost depleted. Usually people top things off. What you've described, the quick ones that are like 15 minutes are level 3 chargers. They're about 10 times more expensive. I do agree with you that we need to have at least 1 or 2 available just to provide that as an option. And as more grants come up, that is a priority that I hope that we can address. But at this juncture right now, we're just trying to show that this technology is around and that we're using it.
Well, I hope if council doesn't mind, maybe I'll reach out to the university and see if that's something there that they may want to take a look at and help develop those level 3 chargers. Not only would that be helpful for us and our community, but the state, and it can bring in revenue to PSL. You know, they're working on these masks for healthcare workers, and they're doing a good job. So let me reach out to them if you all don't mind. And you never know, they could develop that. And can you imagine that would be pretty neat. Councilor Sword.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add to what Lisa said and what you're saying. Car manufacturers this is still a new technology, and car manufacturers are going to be improving the charging and improving the cars and bring the price down. So it will get better over time.
No, I agree with you, Councilor. But if you stop and think about it, if we help develop this type of a business, so to speak, and then we can turn it over to other companies to continue to run and expand on it. And just think if we could get that going in our industrial park, if we could start developing that, then we turn it over, and next thing you know, we could actually be on the forefront of producing these level 3 chargers that Lisa was talking about. That I think that'd be something to look at. I mean, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And I really believe that is going to be key. If you could literally have these level 3 chargers everywhere, you know, like right now, I have a friend who has a Tesla, and he gets a charge in Socorro and then Albuquerque, because his car supposedly can only go 200 miles, and he was concerned that his wife would, if she was to drive to Albuquerque, that she'd run out of a charge, and so he charges up in Socorro. But can you imagine if you had one of these chargers every, you know, Tier C, Socorro, Los Lunas or Belen, Albuquerque? I mean, all along the line, we'd be doing pretty good. So
yes,
if you guys are okay, I'll reach out to the university and see if that's something there that they might want to collaborate and work on partnerships with the city, if we could do anything.
Mr. Mayor, actually the state does have that going on now, a plan. They're working on a plan to put charging stations along the interstates, for example.
Yeah, but if we help develop it, I think we could bring revenue into the city. You know, so
very good.
We don't want the state to, you know, we got to be thinking about revenue.
Okay. Yes, we do.
Cash.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so then let's go ahead and move forward with that resolution. And if there's nothing further, I believe that's I think that's it.
Thank you very much.
I was using my.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, if there's nothing further, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion made by Councillor Flotis and second by Councillor Sorg that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, we're adjourned. It's
Aye.
3:59 p.m.
To a contractor who's licensed. I mean,
Yes.
you know, you still have a fallback if the person doesn't come through or the, whatever. Anyway,
So long.
so long.
See you later.
Adiós, amigos, compañeros de mi vida. Adiós.
Okay, Mayor, I'm ready when you are.
Are you ready? Okay, so this is the agenda setting meeting for our May 4th, 2020 City Council meeting. Number 1, non-consent.
1 non-consent,
2, non-consent.
2 non-consent,
3, consent.
3 consent,
4, non-consent.
4 non-consent,
5, consent.
5 consent,
6, non-consent.
6 non-consent,
7, non-consent.
7 non-consent.
Great.
Thank you. I moved my lamp, by the way.